Once more, we're talking about everyone's favorite new Spider-Man character, Paul, mainly because it's Spider-Man's 950th issue, so naturally we need 10 pages dedicated to this Paul dolt. I made it pretty clear that Marvel's prior attempt at making Paul seem sympathetic are rather flawed. Him being the survivor of a dead world because of a catastrophe he helped cause is a decent premise. However, his sorrow is nominal at best, and needless to say, the attempt to make him sympathetic and heroic in Dead Language's flashback involved him pushing an exploding death god into a metropolitan area right on top of Peter, so he could be trapped with MJ rather than, throwing MJ through the portal and having a evil death god explode where he stands in a dead world. There is such a dissonance between what the narrative tells us about Paul and his heroism and what is actually happening right in front of our eyes. Now, we can correct this. Does this book even try to correct it? Fun fact: no. Sympathetic Paul backstory not found. Here's a quick rundown of it. Paul played bureaucrat to his father's experiments. Like all science experiments, it's constantly strapped for funding. Paul eventually finds out what his father has been up to. This is the legit face he makes when he sees his own father just killed a guy and now is about to usher in the apocalypse. I know I gave you the high points of the 10 pages of work, but if you feel, that's just the high points of a ripoff, you have every right to feel that way. For one, it really didn't expand upon anything we didn't already see in Dead Language, other than telling us what Paul's specific role was, basically a bureaucrat in the whole endeavor. So, an uncharitable reading of this dialogue can happen. Not if we can't pay for it. He's supposed to be designing practical solutions we can monetize. It makes Paul come off as very greedy, especially since, you could play the stereotype game with his last name. Honestly, I don't see it that way. I don't see Paul as this apathetic to his father's eccentricities bit so long as he can monetize it. In fact, I see this as probably the most sympathetic point about Paul. Let me explain for a second. In the sciences and research in general, if your research isn't monetizable or can lead to something that is monetizable, you could easily be strapped for funding or just end up on the cutting room floor altogether. And honestly, this would be a nice conflict. At least, that's what I would say if we didn't already see this and his more questionable choices altogether. I question why Marvel would even try to show his backstory with this specific role of him being middle manager for his father's madness. He's not even in the same room as his father for most of the flashback. If you want to make Paul sympathetic, Marvel should have given both Paul and Benjamin some actual interactions other than just Benjamin being a raving madman. Actually, show Benjamin Rabin manipulating Paul's trust in him. Have Paul be some kid desiring his father's love and approval, only to realize the cost of getting that is an apocalyptic wasteland of death and suffering. Hell, half the story takes place on Earth 616, where Rabin's experiments didn't end the world because Paul never existed. Marvel could have easily done a story where there was a case and have him basically go, okay, Benjamin wasn't successful here. The only factor that I see is that I didn't exist. What if I was never born? What if this is always the fate of what happens in a universe where I was born? That would be pretty strong stuff. Seriously, the amount of incompetence in this run is staggering. Not only are we getting the backstory that we already saw, with nothing added to the experience, but also we locked MJ out of the book. MJ has a bigger impact on the Spider-Man mythos than Paul, but she gets shafted for a story about her perfect boyfriend. This only further reinforces they don't know what to do with Paul other than he is just Mary Jane's perfect boyfriend. The more backstory they give him, the more character traits they give him, the more conflict they give him, it's all pointless in the long run, because he is a background character trying to punch above his weight. And honestly, that explains a lot. It feels like they just made this up as they went along. No cohesive idea. I get this is a periodic medium, but at the same time, You kinda need to have some kind of long-term planning if you're going to plop someone into a supporting cast like this. It feels like there was no long-term planning. They're just plopping up random crap together, hoping that something sticks, and it's hopefully cohesive. Those are my thoughts. Like, subscribe, tip the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.